I go back and I talk to my previous self at my fine old age, and I let myself know that I was doing the best that I could with the resources and the knowledge that I had at the time. And it's good that I've learned, but I don't need to be upset with myself for not having learned then. Easier said than done, but I try to just kind of like, I'll like physically hold myself sometimes, and just be like, just remember, you know, at every point in your life, you're doing the best you can. Your best just changes over time. Okay, the lights got turned back on. My eyes adjust.
Look at this, so pretty.
Can you grow me some cooler stuff this time with that odd seed packet? So important. It really is, yeah. And I think something that I journal a lot, and I think something I wrote in my journal maybe like a year ago was that I'm really proud of every version of myself because that's how I got here. And sure, as I am now, I would make and do make different choices. But that's the point, right? Because I made the other choices that I made, and maybe I would make different choices now, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the choices I was making before were wrong or bad. They were just younger, you know. And not that there's like an age thing where it's like, ah, yes, with age you'll always be smarter or better. Like, I'm not saying that. But sometimes, yes, Gwen isn't here. We've established that. Sometimes your younger self makes choices that your older self wouldn't make. And again, as long as you can learn something from it and you can understand that you would make different choices, then you haven't failed. It's again, much easier said than done. But something that I've long believed is that as long as you learn something from every choice you make, as long as you grow even just a little bit, even just to say, oh, I wouldn't do that again, good, bad, indifferent, then you know, it's not a stopping point. And failure itself is not a stopping point. Failure itself is a natural part of the process. The stopping point is shame. And that's really where, you know, it gets you, because if you let yourself be ashamed of choices or ashamed of decisions or ashamed of the past, that's how you get stuck. That's how you don't grow. Failure is literally built in, right? Like, it's the scientific method. Like, you don't decide that something goes from hypothesis to theory until you've tried and failed at least once. It's much harder to do in an emotional sense, and in a healing sense, of course, but it's just as important, in my opinion. And that's actually why eventually, in the 7 million projects that I want to start, I actually really want to start a podcast called I Suck at This, because I want to talk to people about failure. Because everyone fails. You're going to fail. And the second that you decide that you want to do something, even if you've done it before, you'll probably fail. And that's okay. Because again, it is a natural byproduct of just doing anything. I fail all the time. I've been knitting since I was 9 years old. I've been knitting for 25 years. And I guess I'll just talk right now because the boat is boating on its own anyway. I've been knitting for 25 years, and I still, like, just yesterday, I started one of these. I'm making myself like some, yeah, I know, I'm excited. It will be like an interview-based podcast, and I have some people that I've already lined up. But I have to get other things off of my list before I start new ones, they say, for the millionth time to themselves. I started making myself these little cotton washcloths out of cotton yarn. And, exactly, mistakes are proof that you're trying. And I was like, okay, I have these 2 colors. I kind of had this idea. I was like, I could go with this simpler pattern, or I could try out this other pattern that I want to do. And I got like, I don't know, 12 rows in, and I looked at it and I was like, I don't like this. I don't like how this is working up. I don't like how the colors are combining in this sense. And if I had just looked at it and gone, I have failed to make the washcloth, this is bad, then I wouldn't have a washcloth. But instead I was like, okay, I tried it. It didn't work. I'll just do a different pattern. Like, and it's not that I'm, you know, bad at knitting or that I should give up knitting or anything like that. It was just a part of the process. I tried and it didn't work, so then I did something else and I ended up making the washcloth and finishing it this morning. Like, and it's done now, so I have a new washcloth that I could use. Like, and if we are able to get past the idea that mistakes or failure or, you know, quote unquote being bad at something is reason to not do something, then we'll be unstoppable. Truly. I didn't mean to go into Gwen's house. I was trying to feed the cat. Hello. Oh, wow, you are starving. Oh, wait, you don't like fine dining. Acquired taste? Simple? Mm-hmm. Okay, you like that. I'm gonna go grill some more shellfish. And yeah, it's very hard to get out of that headspace. Rice! Saying I'm more creative, but keep getting set back. It doesn't look perfect how I wanted to. I don't want to do it anymore. Yep. Trust me. Ooh, boy, do I ever understand. Especially when you couple in any kind of anything. Like trauma, parenting, like any sort of external influence, society, right? Like it's very, even just like social media, it's very, very difficult to feel like, oh, these other people. And again, I've been a musician since I was like, I've been writing songs. I went to college for music. I have won awards. I've played around the world. I still will always and forever probably. I'm like, I'm not good enough. I don't, you know, whatever. I'll never be as good as someone else, and that's something that like you just kind of have to accept. There will always be people who are quote unquote better than you, but there will always be people who aren't as experienced and aren't as skilled. And the thing that I remind myself of is 2 things, really. Number 1 is do what you like for you, and don't worry about what other people are doing, because they're doing it. Let them do that. That's their thing. Even if you feel like you're doing the same thing but not as well, you're not doing the same thing. It's just not happening. And then also, a phrase that I remind myself of often is hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. I really would love if, as a society, we could just disband with this idea that artists are solely talented. Of course, I think there's, you know, factor it in, right? Like, it's an aspect of it. But you can't just go around being like, oh my god, they're so talented, there's a da-da-da-da-da-da-da. They fucking worked. It's a skill. Just like any other trade or labor or career is a skill set, so is art. And in the same way that someone doesn't wake up one morning able to run a marathon, they practiced, they trained to run that marathon. You know, NBA players don't wake up being like, I, you know, make 3-pointers every single time. They train for that, And yes, again, natural affinity. Oh no, the ads! I'll wait. I'll wait until they're back. I think this might be actually a good idea, a good time to just switch over to this. Screen. I just got a protein drink. Mine was Cracker Barrel. Oh man, I haven't been to a Cracker Barrel in so long. I think the last time I went to a Cracker Barrel was when I was in college. But yeah, I forget exactly, thanks to my ADHD, I forget exactly what I was saying. Art and creativity, even in an intangible sense. I'm not even talking about a specific sense like visual art or music or anything to that effect. But creativity is a skill set. It is something that gets better when practiced. I'm just gonna pause this and go back to the main screen because I think I'm done gaming for now, but I still want to hang out and chat for a little bit. But yeah, it's intuition is something that you can practice. Creativity is something that you can practice. It's like if you design things for a long time, little by little, it becomes second nature to kind of see what makes a good design, what works for certain styles. Just like if you are a tradesperson or you work in a steel mill, little by little, those things become second nature. Those things become muscle memory. Those things become just unconscious actions. In the same way that if you work retail, you memorize the aisle locations, the shelves, the prices, right? Like, it doesn't necessarily happen overnight. It's developed over time. It's practiced. And if we could just view art and creativity in that same sense, I think we would be a lot better off, frankly, personally, professionally, societally. And not just think of it as this, like, amorphous, intangible, set-in gift from the heavens that is unexplainable. It's like, again, natural affinity, sure, that might be there, but that doesn't mean that you can't learn to do something for which you have no natural affinity. Taking a break completely first arena on Instagram because it just felt so bad. Something I truly enjoy, surrounded by ideas that need to be. Yep. I do things that I'm bad at all the time. Honestly, I like playing video games because I'm kind of bad at most of them. I'm very happy that I'm at a point where I'm like, I don't need to be good at something if I like doing it. I love playing chess. Am I particularly good at chess? No. But I love playing chess. It's fun. And I wish that we could encourage other people to do things that they love and enjoy, regardless of whether or not they're good at it. Because one, kind of like you said, you don't need to monetize everything. And you don't need to become proficient. Plenty of people love singing, and this is something that, like, I know I say this in jest, but at the same time it is kind of true. I genuinely believe that everyone can sing. And now my tongue-in-cheek follow-up to that is usually whether or not anybody else wants to hear it is a separate conversation. But, like, in a serious sense, I do believe that everyone loves to sing. Whether or not they are going to do it in front of anyone. And, like, yeah, to a certain extent, whether or not anybody else wants to hear it, which I don't mean in a disparaging way, but I just mean that, like, you can enjoy singing, but maybe it's not suited to be a career move for you. But also, I'm not the one to make that judgment call. And, like, I think, again, it's too easy to just gatekeep artistic endeavors, especially. and decide that, you know, there's like some finite number of spaces for creative or artistic individuals to occupy, which is not true at all. But it's scarcity mindset, but with the arts is, you know, yeah. And singing is very important. Like, there's so many different styles. There's so many different ways to sing, and sometimes it's just important to do it because it just helps get that energy out, you know? Yeah, I love Chapel Roan. But yeah, the people that I take the most issue with on social media are the people who gatekeep and the people who make it seem like they've got all the answers and they've got it all together and they can single-handedly, you know, do this one thing, and if you're not doing as well as them, then you're not succeeding. And I'm like, okay, first of all, people like that who have like high up influencer clout, we'll just say, 9 times out of 10, they have a team. They're not doing the job of 17 people. They have 17 people doing the job of 17 people. And they're the face of that brand, which is fine, but you need to be transparent about that. Because otherwise you are doing a disservice to your followers and you're doing a disservice to yourself, because you're making your followers feel like shit because all they're getting is your face being like, do what I do every single day and you too can succeed. And that's not true, right? So it's false advertising in that sense. And then you're doing yourself a disservice because you are allowing yourself to discourage other people and to make them feel like they'll never be good enough, which, whether they intend to make other people feel like that or not, is kind of irrelevant, right? Like impact versus intent. Yeah, like it feels like a weird game. Absolutely, it does a little bit. It's like, and I totally get the whole like keeping up with the Joneses mindset. I've fallen into that trap myself. Years ago, when I was much, much younger, I think like for the first time ever, this was, oh God, I don't even think, maybe like Twitter and Instagram had like just started existing. So like Facebook was the place. So this tells you how long ago this was. But I posted, not on my personal page. Maybe I did post it on my personal page. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember if I posted it on like my music page or on my personal page, but one of the two. The point is, I posted something about struggling with like the come down off of some like big summer concert that I had played, and or just struggling with like my depression in general. Again, the core of it is I posted something about struggling, not in like a self-pitying poor me kind of way, but just being honest and transparent about what I was going through. And again, to be perfectly honest and transparent, my dad was like, you shouldn't post that on social media. People don't want to see that. And how I internalized that was only post the good times, never tell anybody on social media or off if you're struggling. And so for a very, very, very long time, because keep in mind, when I posted this, I think I was like 16. I was a teenager. I was going through a lot because teenagers go through a lot. And I probably for like probably for a solid 15 years, I maintained that, and I didn't tell people what I was struggling with or about less than like pleasant times. I internalized a lot. I kept a lot inside, and all that did was make my struggle that much worse. It didn't help me, and then it didn't help other people because they would see, you know, oh, you're doing so well, and so this and so that, and then maybe they would actually like see me in person, or I would hang out with, you know, friends or be at a show or whatever, and they only saw the highlight reel. And now my entire like platform brand self, you know, thing is I'm just like, nah, fuck it. I feel a lot of things. I feel a lot of things very deeply, and I think that it needs to be talked about and normalized. And I think that it is important to, if you're going to get on social media, I think it's important to share, again, barring like personal privacy, internet safety. I totally get that. And no one is entitled to have to share what they don't want to share. But I think it's important to be able to have a space for yourself to share all of those things, and not always be exciting and entertaining, because life is not always exciting and entertaining. And it gives me the same feeling as like good vibes only people, because I'm like, nah, fuck that. All the vibes. I live through all the vibes, so I should be able to hold space for all the vibes, whether I like the vibes or not. Because that's the human experience. The human experience is all the vibes. The human experience is the roller coaster. The human experience is the good, the bad, the indifferent, the unpleasant, the wins, the challenges, and the mediocre. It's the extremes, and it's everything in between. And if you're not experiencing all of those things, and you're not holding space for or allowing yourself to sit with all those things, I'm not saying live there all the time, but if you're not at least recognizing that that exists, then again, I think you're just doing yourself a disservice. And I think that honestly, your life will be much harder than if you were to be like, all right, today's shit, you know? Or today I just don't feel right, or something feels off, or I'm just tired, or I can't quite, like, whatever the case may be. Yeah, I'll absolutely make this part of the VOD rewatchable, for sure. I'm happy to. And that's, you know what, I will make this promise, because I know my brain. At the end of today, I will cut this, I'll comp this lovely chat that we've had, and I will immediately post it to YouTube. And then I will take the YouTube link and I will post it in Discord. That will be my project for today. That is my promise, and I'm making it to you and to myself. Which, by the way, mediocre, if you want, please do join our Discord. I'm assuming that you're at least 18 years old because you're here. So feel free to come join the Discord server so that you can have that link as well. And then I know I didn't... come on. I want to typey things. Let me typey things. Let me typies. So that way you have the link to the YouTube channel as well. Come on, tablet. Okay, great. It's good. Okay, great. Yeah. So, yeah, because this is something that I like to talk about. And actually, I guess maybe this will be like my official announcement or whatever. Part of, I know earlier I referenced my diagnosis, and obviously I've just sort of begun being open about it, but I hadn't been making any announcements. However, one of the things that this diagnosis has helped me to understand and helped me to realize is that I want to go back to school, and I want to get a master's degree, and I want to become a grief counselor for the living. And what I mean by that is grief. Yes, obviously there's grief when you lose someone. There's grief when someone passes away. There's grief when you go through any kind of like big shock but there's also small grief. There's you know, the grief of moving somewhere new, perhaps, or just like general life changes. And I would love to be able to offer therapy for like non-grief related issues as well. Because I think that like the conversations like we're having now, you know, kind of talking about shame and failure and life and just this sort of bombardment of pressure from societal expectations and social media expectations is a weight and a grief in its own kind. And I want to be able to sort of help people with that. So yeah, it's kind of a, you know, because like I know for me the grief of my own diagnosis, right? Like having to accept and process and give up what I thought my life was going to be for what my life will probably look like, and being willing to kind of face the unknown with bravery and hopefulness, but also being grounded in the day-to-day. And remembering that it is day to day, and in much the same way of like what we've been talking about, of just like letting other people's lives and highlight reels and expectations and goals be theirs, and trying to divest ourselves from that it's hard. And I think that there's like some grief and some loss there, because sometimes you do have life goals that, not that you need to give up, but maybe you just need to rework a little bit. And I want to be able, I don't know, all I've ever wanted is to be able to help people. And my life seems to be shaping up in a very specific way to be able to help people in a very specific way. And sometimes it's being chaotic while playing video games, and other times it's having conversations like this. And I love that. I love that they go hand in hand and they're not mutually exclusive, you know. Because I have conversations like this with people a lot, and those are my favorite conversations, I think. I don't really do shit about the weather. I like to talk about this stuff. Love to have a resource like this in college. Yeah. Yep. No, I completely understand that. And what else? It's a very lack of this kind of resource. No, absolutely. And I agree with you. You know, agree with you both, really, is that like a resource like this, because it's not always big grief, right? You know, sometimes it's a small thing, like your favorite mug breaks. And is that on the same level as you and your best friend no longer speak anymore because of circumstances out of control? Honestly, maybe, because emotions are weird and everyone feels things at different levels. And so I think it's important that we're able to both say, all right, you've lost your favorite mug, and not like, you know, Freudian over what do you think the mug represents? Like, I'm not saying that, but like that is a kind of grief. And sometimes what that can tie into, like for me personally, I constantly feel like I'll get something nice and I'll get something new, and then one thing that will happen and I feel like I can't have nice things. Like I got this mug and it's one of my favorite mugs. It says Hero Legend Dad on it. And then I think I like dropped something when I was like I was washing dishes, and I like dropped something and it chipped one crack, and I had like only had that mug for a month. And like, it's a mug, right? It's the whole, it's not really about a mug thing. It was just yet another experience of like, I just got this mug and I love it. And yet again, something happens where I can't have nice things. I still have the mug. The mug is still perfectly usable. I just don't drink out of that little corner, right? but there's still a tiny piece of grief to that. And like being able to then go, okay, why do I feel like I can't have nice things? Is that actually a thing? Or is it just, I do have nice things. They're not perfect. They're not movie worthy, but that's because I use them. And they're still nice and they're still functional. Maybe I don't put them on display in IKEA, but that doesn't mean it's not still nice. And then sort of getting outside your own head a little bit and being able to shift your perspective can help, you know. And yeah, it can absolutely be the little things. I just had no real reaction except, oh, it's awful, I'm sorry, but I was having some issues logging into something and just got so mad and upset. Yep, absolutely. It can be wildly unrelated, you know, or seem wildly unrelated to something bigger that, you know, again, ties into whatever the case may be. And sometimes, you know, maybe the way that you're processing that, like maybe you do still feel kind of no real reaction. And I think that's okay too, because sometimes, how do I put this? Sometimes we have too much going on. Sometimes we have so many feelings. I think especially, and I'm not saying that either of you are neurodivergent or anything like that. I'm just equating it to my own experience in this sense. I think sometimes it's very easy for neurodivergent people to feel the constant like yarn tangle of emotions, and one little thing comes by and like, oh, let me just like cut this one piece of yarn that seems unrelated to this other piece of yarn, but then the whole thing falls apart and it's no longer a yarn tangle. It's like wet spaghetti and you don't have a fork, and it's just absolute frustration and madness and chaos. And so I think it's also easy, whether you are neurodivergent or not, to let your emotions take a back seat, especially if you've already got something going on and then something happens. Because like I know for me, years ago, when my maternal great-grandfather died, I didn't care. And to this day, I still kind of don't. Because I didn't have a relationship with him like that. And it's not that I was like dancing or celebrating his passing. Of course not. But I did not grieve like I grieved when I lost my cat a couple years ago. And I think that speaks to the complicated nature, again, of human emotions, of human relationships. And I think we also should allow for not being sad. Maybe not being sad immediately, maybe not being sad at all. Maybe not being sad to the extent that we feel other people are sad, and so we feel like we should be sad at that level. And obviously all of this is just my opinion. I'm not a qualified professional yet. But I've always felt very close to grief and death in a, like a transformative sense, right? Like the end of one thing, the beginning of another is a death of you know, like in the tarot, death isn't actually like death or an ending. It's a closing of one chapter and a beginning of a new one in certain contexts, or a transition from one place to another. Yeah, just not judging your emotions. Something that, and this might sound a little bit weird, and I don't care if anyone believes me or not. Spiritfarer is very apt for this. I'm glad. That's why I was like, you know what, let me just leave the music up in the home screen and everything for this. But totally fair. Again, if you don't believe this, totally fair. If you don't give any credence to it, I know what actually happened, and that's fine. I have done some what's often referred to as like connecting and questioning, and or for lack of a better word, like channeling certain etheric beings. I'm obviously very spiritual. I've studied tarot for years. I'm also a witch and a light worker, so to give you some context. But one of the higher beings that I connected to and spoke with once was Buddha, and he gave me this advice, which I have carried with me, and kind of ties into what we're talking about now, which is you do not always need to know what the emotion is. Sometimes it is enough to know that you feel it. And it goes kind of like what Owen just said, was like out with judging our emotions, in with observing them and taking care of ourselves. Sometimes it's just enough to know I feel a particular way. You don't necessarily need to analyze it. You don't necessarily need to qualify it or justify why you feel a particular way. You don't necessarily need to get down to the bottom of things. Sometimes it's enough to know that that's what you feel. And then you can sit with that. And more often than not, just sitting with it, like having a friend over for tea in silence, you know, on the porch, staring out at the trees, not saying anything. Sometimes that's enough. And the feeling can just be felt and you can move on. Other times, feelings need to be delved into a little bit more. They need to be rooted around. They need to kind of like in a garden, sometimes you need to like dig out the old stuff so that you can change over and till the soil and plant something new, whether it's the same thing but just a new version of the plant or an entirely different plant. But then other times it's just about being like, I feel weird. Maybe you don't even know what the weird is. Maybe it's not even a bad weird, but you just feel weird. And leaving it at that. Because, yeah, I am very much, I overthink everything, including but not limited to my overthinking. And always wanting to be solving things, always wanting to have the solution. Yeah, exactly. Some, diamonds are made under pressure, but dough needs to be left to rest in order to rise. Every person, every situation, every emotion needs something different. And it's very easy, and not judging at all, because I do the same thing. It's very easy to want to apply a one-size-fits-all. It's very easy to want to fix everything. It's very easy to want to solve everything, because again, I do the same thing myself. And it's much harder to say, I'm just going to be with this for as long as it hangs around and see what happens, and relinquish a little bit of control in that sense. And the irony is, from my own experience, when I've been able to do that, usually what happens is, in a moment of complete what feels like apropos of nothing, out of left field, wasn't even thinking about it necessarily, I can come upon the core of it, and I can usually release it, or it eventually just goes away without me thinking about it, and then I go, oh, I guess I don't feel weird anymore. And then also, in a more grounded, tangible, practical sense, sometimes you just fucking need to eat something and drink some goddamn water and take a nap. Sometimes that is what you need, because everything ties into everything else. Body, to me, that's what it means, like the unification of body, mind, and spirit. Sometimes it literally is, you need to drink some water. or you need to take a step back, or you need to just touch grass. And I'm not saying, I'm not going to be one of those people who's like, have you tried to cure your depression by going for a walk? Because that's bullshit, and that's not how that works. I'm not saying that's the case at all. What I am saying is that emotions always have been and will always be temporary and malleable to a certain extent. Sometimes the temporary is a lot longer, but it's still temporary. And for me, especially when like my anxiety kicks up about a certain thing and I start to spiral, I tell myself, eat something, get a glass of water, and if you have time for it or you have space for it, take a nap. If none of those three things work, then you may panic. And that works for me because usually the food and the water help. The nap usually helps too. But also it lets me know that I can panic if I need to. I can give in to my anxiety if I need to. But first, I have to try something else. I allow myself to spiral, and I go, okay, we're gonna spiral. If spiraling is what we need to do and nothing else works, then yeah, let's spiral. However, first, let's see if we can do these other things to avoid the spiral or to figure out why we might spiral. And then if those things don't work, spiraling it is. I'm not telling myself I can't feel something or telling myself I can't be a certain way. I'm just seeing if there's something else that needs to happen first. And yeah, I do love that quote too. If you feel like you hate everybody, eat something. If you feel like everybody hates you, sleep. If you feel like you hate yourself, take a shower. Yeah. I would love to make focaccia. I've made other types of bread. I love bread. But I've never made focaccia. It's probably easy. Oh yeah, focaccia is a big trust the process bread from what I've seen and heard. But yeah. I gotta get some fresh garlic, and then I will make focaccia. Did I tell my bread story on stream? I tried once in high school and have not tried since. Yes, thank you for like chatting and having these conversations. I will talk for the next 7 hours if no one stops me. Because again, I think it's so important, and I think that we don't often give ourselves these kinds of conversations. I think it's really easy to like feel weird about talking about it. Feel like, I don't know, awkward, or like, oh, how is the other person gonna take it? I've gotten to a point in my life now where like, I don't give a fuck if anybody believes me about like the spiritual stuff, about the emotional stuff. Like, it is what it is, and I'm just gonna share it, and other people can do what they want with that information. I'm so glad that this has been like helpful, because like I think I've needed to kind of have this conversation too. And yeah, that's another big thing, is like going back to the emotions and you know, like taking a nap and everything, giving yourself time to rest, be it sleep or not, but giving yourself time to rest, to be off, and frankly to do nothing. Not as an inactivity, but as an activity. Doing nothing is an active process. And I think it's really, really important to give yourself time and space to do that. And I've started building in, I call them my stay home all day days, where I don't leave my house, I don't go on social media, I don't talk to anybody. 9 times out of 10, I clean my house, I get some projects done. You know, like I'm not necessarily not, quote unquote, not doing anything. But I also have other days that are my do nothing days. I let myself sleep in. I don't set an alarm. And I understand that not everyone's life allows for these kinds of things. So I'm not trying to be like, one size fits all, blah, blah, blah. I think that there are ways to carve out spaces like this for yourself, but everybody's life looks different. And so that's going to take different tools to carve out those spaces. And I'm honestly, I will offer, if y'all want to chat more about this or ask questions or like come up with a way of, how can I carve out space for myself like this? I'm happy to help. But like my do nothing days are quite literally, I do nothing. And then I tell myself I am not allowed to get mad at myself for doing nothing because that's what I decided to do. Even if at the end of the day I wished I had done something, I tell myself, well, what you did was rest. What you did was nothing. What you did was honor your body's need to shut off and not accomplish anything, because it's so easy to only rest when we've hit a wall. It's so easy to only rest when we've gotten to the point that we're burned out and we don't have anything else to do or to be or to give. Guilt is a hell of a drug, and internalized capitalism is the worst kind of guilt, because again, it's always going to tell you that if you're not being a productive member of society, even in your own home, then you're not worth something. And you're not worth loving yourself. You're not worth being happy. You're not allowed to be content, which is some bullshit. But it's constant. And it's very easy to listen to that. I spent pretty much the entire time that we were in quarantine tearing myself apart and rebuilding myself and learning how to talk to myself and accepting, or at least trying to be aware of when do I need to give myself a stern talking to and be like, hey, you're letting yourself whatever, so let's, pull this shit together a little bit. And going, okay, is this my body and my brain asking me to not accomplish anything today because it needs this period, right? This dough needs time to rise. And so can I honor that? And I'll say this to myself. I said this to myself just the other day. Is there anything that I can do within my own home, whatever the case may be? Is there anything that I can do that will both honor my body's needs to rest with my brain's desire to accomplish something? Even something small, like putting my next work week schedule into my phone calendar so that I'm not expending a lot of energy, but I feel like I've done something. And that's helped me, as well as sometimes I'll give myself a very stern talking to be like, hey, you said you wanted to do this today. What's holding you back? What do you think is causing you to not do X or to let yourself do something else instead? And then I have to be honest with myself because I'm the only one holding me accountable. And yeah, being an adult is weird, man. You have to like self-parent. It's very strange, but I should probably go and eat part of my mountain of curry and give myself the rest of the night to just rest and watch some shows and maybe start another washcloth. Self-parenting is so real, and it really does suck. Sometimes, though, I let myself run amok, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be rebellious, and I'm not even going to listen to me. And you need that sometimes. It's a balance. It's all just a balance.